Circuit Criminal Division is now in session. The Honorable Mr. Ingrid, the Honorable Judge Mr. Ingrid is presiding.
Everyone but the jury be seated. Mr. Devin Ballard, would you please swear in the jury?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will truly listen to this case and render a true verdict and a fair sentence as to this defendant?
Yes.
You may be seated.
Members of the jury, your duty today will be to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty based only on the facts and evidence provided in this case. The prosecution had the burden of proving the guilt of the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden remains on the prosecution through the trial. The prosecution must prove that a crime was committed and that the defendant is the person who committed the crime. However, if you are not satisfied with the defendant's guilt to that extent, then reasonable doubt exists and the defendant must be found not guilty. Mr. Devin Ballard, what is today's case?
Your Honor, today's case is the State of North Dakota versus Thomas Osiski.
Is the prosecution ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Before we start, would you please identify yourself
My name is Noah Rolfe.
and your co-counsel?
My co-counsel is Grace Gorder and Macy Nesha.
Thank you. Is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you please identify yourself, your co-counsel, and your defendant?
My name is Logan Lapizza, my co-counsel is Reagan Lee, and my defendant is Thomas Osiski.
Thank you. We will now begin the case. The attorney for the state of North Dakota, or call the prosecuting attorneys, will go first.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Noah Rolfe, and my co-counsel with me today is Grace Gorder and Macy Nesha. We are presenting to you the homicide of Martin Lewis Sirius. On the night of May 31st, 2009, the defendant, Thomas Osiski, former bandmate of the deceased, was found in Martin's home by law enforcement. Martin was brutally murdered at gunpoint by his own bandmate in the midst of doing what he loved, writing music. Along with Thomas was the biological son of Martin, Pat Nugent Sirius. Pat and his father hadn't been reunited until recently. Just as their father-son relationship was growing, it was just as quickly ripped away from Pat. Now Pat will never be able to make up the future birthdays, Christmases, Father's Days, and memories that they could have made together. Detective Stephen Tyler is the first testimony that you will hear today. He was the first law enforcement officer to be on the scene after the incident. He was able to clearly identify the defendant at the scene with blood on his hands. The second testimony that you will be hearing is from Dr. Erin Drake, the autopsy analyst. She used her expert knowledge from past cases to verify that this was indeed a homicide. The last testimony that you will be hearing today is from Pat Sirius, in which he explains how Thomas came into possession of a gun that killed Martin. We are charging Thomas Osiski with first-degree murder because all the factors are there. There was premeditation and intent, which means that the defendant planned the murder ahead of time. This being said, the only reason that Thomas went to Martin's house was to kill him. Based on the evidence we will provide you today, you will find the defendant, Thomas Osiski, guilty beyond reasonable doubt of first-degree murder. Thank you.
you, Mr. Rolfe. Does the defense wish to make an opening statement now?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Logan Lopizza, and my co-counsel is Reagan Lee. May 31st, 2009, at approximately 9:30 p.m., Thomas Duke Osiski knocks on the door of Martin Lewis Serez, noticing it was already dark. Thomas walks in and says hello as he normally does, but this time there was no answer. He figures Marty may be in the studio, so he goes that way. When he reaches the studio, he notices Marty is slumped over the piano. Due to the presence of a bottle of Jack Daniels and sleeping pills scattered across the piano, he figures Marty has passed out as he had done many times before. As he approaches Marty, he notices an earplug in one ear and recognizes the song, Hanging at Death's Door, playing. Thomas touches his shoulder to wake him up, but this time notices his lifelong best friend and bandmate is limp. He feels and sees the blood on his shoulder and realizes that this is no ordinary overdose. He grabs his right wrist to feel for a pulse, and there is none. He looks to the floor and sees Marty's gun laying below his dangling right hand. Instantly, he thinks his friend is off himself. A whirlwind of scenarios rushes through Thomas's mind as he tries to wrap his head around the situation that he has just walked into. He wonders how he had gotten the gun back, or if he had even gotten it back at all. Thomas wonders whether or not his son Pat had given Marty the gun to off himself with, or if he had killed his own father. Thomas rushes out of the house to find Pat, and finds him washing off in their pool with a bar of soap. Pat seems to have no clue of the situations currently happening in the house, and wonders how he had never heard a gunshot. Due to the evidence of this case, it is able to be concluded that this was, in fact, a suicide. You will hear from our medical expert, Dr. Lee Von Helm, who has over 27 years of experience with cases involving suicidal tendencies. Dr. Helm has concluded from his examination of Martin's years of drug and alcohol abuse and whirlwind of constant mood swings that Martin had all the earmarks of a suicide waiting to happen. Dr. Helm will explain the components of Martin's will and life insurance policy and how the information provided in these two documents screams nothing other than suicide. The will leaves all of Martin's estate to the Save the Music Foundation, including his house, musical education facilities, and all equipment. The will leaves all proceeds from the song, It's So Shizzo, to his former bandmate, Thomas Osiski, as long as he acknowledges that Martin wrote all the lyrics to the song. Nothing is left to his son Pat other than a $1 million life insurance policy. However, if the insured commits suicide within 1 year of the policy being in effect, which he did, the only amount payable to the beneficiary will be the premium paid for the policy, which is significantly less. Due to the fact that there was no shell casing found at the crime scene, there is good reason to believe that Pat had found the shell casing before Thomas had arrived and hid it to make it look like a homicide, so he will be paid the $1 million from the policy. You will hear from Alex Rose, a friend of Martin's son Pat, that Thomas is not capable of committing such a gruesome crime. Alex also gives insight to Pat's past and personal feelings and raises questions as to how well he is actually known by the people closest to him. Our client, Thomas Duke Osiski, has been wrongfully accused of the death of his lifelong friend and former bandmate, Martin Serez. They have gone through ups and downs in their partnership, but when it comes down to it, the thought of murder is simply unimaginable. Martin had recently been going through very severe depression, drug and alcohol abuse, and a roller coaster of emotions due to recent events in his life, that he felt no other option than to take his own. Between the instability of Martin's personal feelings and the several conflicting factors brought forward in this case, there is no other option than to find our client, Thomas Duke Osiski, not guilty for the murder of Martin Lewis Serez. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lopizza. Is the state ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Nesham, would you please call your first witness then?
I would like to call Detective Stephen Tyler to the witness stand, please.
Will the witness please come forward and be sworn by the bailiff?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes.
And you can remove your face covering now as you testify. Ms. Nesham?
Could you please state your name for the jury?
Detective Stephen Tyler,
Detective Tyler, by whom are you employed?
the Rockford Police Department.
And for how long have you worked there?
12 years as the senior homicide detective and 5 years as a patrol officer before that.
And what is your current title?
Senior detective assigned to the homicide division.
How long have you been senior detective of the homicide division?
10 years.
How many crime scenes have you investigated in your career?
Thousands.
How many homicides have you investigated?
Over 700.
Your Honor, I ask Detective Stephen Tyler to be qualified and expert in the field of crime scene investigation.
The court will allow his testimony on that basis.
Directing your attention now to the night of May 31st, 2009, at around 9:45 p.m. Did you have occasion to respond to a call of a shooting at 77 Rockford Road here in Rockford?
Yes, I received word that there had been a shooting at the home of Martin Sirius
What time did you arrive at the scene?
around 9:55 p.m.
And what happened when you arrived?
I walked up and the door was open, so I knocked and there was no answer. I said hello as I walked in and drew my sidearm. I walked through the house into the backyard.
And what did you see when you got there?
There was two people conversing.
And who were they?
Pat Nugent Sirius and Thomas Duke Osiski.
Are they here today?
Yes.
Could you please point them out for the jury?
That is Thomas and Pat.
Did either of them seem suspicious?
Yes. Osiski had blood on his hands, and when I asked him what happened, he said, "It's not what you think." He had a very strong smell of alcohol, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was very nervous and fidgety.
What did you see when you walked into the studio?
It was very dark, the lights were off. Sirius was slumped over with his head against the piano. His right arm was hanging down. There was blood in his hair by his right ear, and he had blood running down his side of his face.
Could you go into more detail about how Martin was seated?
Yes, he was slumped over, and the gun was at his side.
Did you observe anything else of interest?
Yes, the gun was seated at his feet.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Can you please identify this picture for me?
It is a picture that we took of the crime scene.
Can you please describe it in more detail for the jury?
It is Martin's right hand hanging down at his side.
Your Honor, I would like to offer this picture into evidence as prosecution's A.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. It is received. And then normally now what you would do in this session is they may have published this to the jury.
Oh.
Okay.
May I publish this to the jury?
Yes, you may.
What did you observe about the gun?
There was a 9mm pistol. There was blood drops on it, on the barrel, and there was a bloody palm print on the gun, and the gun was laying at his feet.
Do you notice how there is smudged hand and fingerprints on the gun, but not any on Martin's palms?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Can you please identify this picture?
It is a picture of Martin.
Can you please describe it in more detail for the jury?
It is Martin slumped over the piano as from the top view, and you can see the gun on the floor and the gunshot wound.
Your Honor, may I submit this piece of evidence in its prosecution's B?
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
No objection. The exhibit is received.
May I publish this for the jury?
Yes, you may.
In your expert opinion,
No,
what part of Osiski's hands did you swab?
the top and bottom and in between his fingers.
In your expert opinion, do you believe this was a homicide or a suicide?
I believe that the drugs and alcohol that he had did not kill him. I believe that this was a homicide, and Thomas Osiski had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill Martin Lewis Sirius.
Thank you, Detective Stevens. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. That's are you cross-examining?
Yes, Your Honor.
The defense gets a shot at you too.
That's the part you don't want.
You can remain seated. You can take your mask off too and ask your questions.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Can you please identify this item?
My affidavit,
Can you describe this item?
my affidavit when I was interviewed.
Your Honor, I offer this piece of evidence I offer this document into evidence as State Exhibit 6.
Defense Exhibit 6.
Defense Exhibit 6.
Okay. Any objection at this date?
No.
No objection. It's received.
Your Honor, may I publish this to the jury?
You may.
Detective Tyler, can you please read the first highlighted section of your affidavit?
When I asked what happened, Osiski said, "I think Marty shot himself." And Pat just stood there. He didn't say anything at that point. He seemed pretty unfazed by the whole thing.
Is this behavior normal for someone seeing their dead father for the first time?
Pat was it is not that uncommon to be shocked by the death.
You said you smelled alcohol on our client's breath, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you do a breathalyzer test?
No. But his eyes were very bloodshot, and he just absolutely reeked of alcohol.
Would you say it's wrong to accuse someone of having alcohol in their system if you never did a breathalyzer test?
No, I do not think it is.
When you arrived at the crime scene, Martin was slumped over the piano, is that correct?
Yes.
His head was against the sheet music to hanging at death's door.
Yes.
His right arm was hanging down beside him,
That's correct.
and the gun was below his dangling right hand.
That's correct.
Can you please read the second highlighted section of your affidavit?
I observed a lot of blood in his hair behind his right ear. It appeared to have been flowed down the right side of his neck onto the upper right shoulder area of his shirt, down his right jawline onto the front of his shirt, and a couple of drops fell onto the piano keys.
You also saw a bloody fingerprint on the outside of the deceased's wrist, is this correct?
Yes.
Is this a logical place where one would typically check for a pulse?
Yes.
So if our client had touched his shoulder where the blood was located and then checked for a pulse, would that explain the bloody fingerprint on the deceased's wrist?
That could be one reason.
And where was the gun located?
At Martin's feet.
Wouldn't it be careless for a murderer to leave the murder weapon at the crime scene for risk of leaving any DNA evidence?
Not if he was covering up.
Is the location of the gun a reasonable location in the aftermath of someone who has committed suicide?
No.
You also saw a bottle of Jack Daniels on the piano, is this correct?
That's correct.
And you saw an open pill bottle and loose pills scattered around?
Yes, they were sleeping pills.
These two substances taken together can cause clouded judgment, is this correct?
That's correct.
Can clouded judgment and escalated depression cause someone to commit suicide?
That could be a reason, yes.
What was Pat's demeanor at the crime scene?
He was just very withdrawn and very shocked.
Was there a shell casing found at the crime scene?
No, there was not.
Would this tell you that there was someone there before Thomas had seen him?
There could be.
Do you believe Pat could have taken the shell casing to receive a greater benefit from the life insurance policy?
No.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect by state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. You may step down. Does the state have a second witness?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to call Dr. Aaron Dre to the witness stand, please.
Dr. Gray, if you would please come forward and be sworn by the bailiff.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Ms. Gordon, you're going to be doing the examination, right?
Yes.
You may proceed.
Can you please state your name for the jury, please?
Dr. Aaron Dre,
Dr. Dre, by whom are you employed?
the Rockford Police Department,
How long have you been employed there?
25 years.
And what is your current title?
I am the Chief Forensics Analyst for the Rockford CPS Laboratory.
And what exactly does the chief forensic analyst do?
I analyze the evidence collected from the crime scenes and autopsies to assess the police department in its investigations.
How many cases have you worked in your career?
Thousands.
Have you testified as an expert in court over the years?
Yes, over 50 times in federal and state court.
Do you have any specialized training?
Yes, I teach courses specifically on homicide and blood spatter analysis for police and prosecutions every year.
Your Honor, I ask Dr. Aaron Dray to be qualified and expert in the field of analyzing crime scene evidence and autopsies.
Any objection by defense?
No, Your Honor.
She is qualified as an expert then.
Directing your attention now to the morning of June 1st, 2009. Did you have occasion to work on a case surrounding the death of Martin Lewis Sirius?
Yes, I did. When I came to work that morning, I went to the Rockford County Medical Examiner's office where Dr. Shanker, the Associate Medical Examiner, performed the autopsy.
And what did you observe?
Well, the first thing we looked at was the back of Martin's head. Based on the significant accumulation of blood, Dr. Shanker concluded that the heart was still pumping when the shot was fired.
Was the gunshot wound stabbed?
Yes, for blood and gunpowder residue.
Did you observe the interior of the skull?
Yes, we traced the path of the bullet from the right rear portion of the skull above and behind the right ear for its resting point behind the left eye.
Was anything removed from the brain?
Yes, the doctor removed a deformed lead bullet fragment that was later to be compared to test bullets fired from the gun found at the scene.
Did you perform a toxicology report?
Yes, I did.
What did the reports reveal?
Mr. Sirius's BAC was a .17 and he had trace amounts of nitropam in his system. Those two together could put you to sleep. What we worry about is if you go into a deep sleep and throw up, you can't wake up from leaks of vomit, and it can fill your throat and lungs, so you could potentially drown in your own vomit.
Was there any vomit present in Martin's lungs or throat?
No, there was not.
What is nitrazepam used for?
It is insomnia. He only had a few trace amounts in his system, which means it was almost out of his system when he took it earlier.
Now, you said you took gunpowder samples for ballistics. Why were those important?
To help us determine whether the gunshot was fired from close range, I know from ballistics training and experience that the closer the muzzle of the gun is to the target, the higher concentration of gunpowder grains there is.
Speaking of the gun, what kind was it?
It was a 9mm semi-automatic pistol.
And does a 9mm semi-automatic pistol produce a shell casing when shot?
Yes.
Did you test the shell casing for anything?
Strangely enough, no. There was no shell casings found at the scene.
Dr. Dray, can you tell us what blowback is?
If a bullet strikes an object such as someone's head at close range, the gases and force of the impact can cause what's inside to literally blow back, such that you can see the fine particles of these materials on the barrel of the gun, in the case of self-inflicted wounds or on the shooter's hands.
Was that the case here?
Let me put it this way, I saw blood on the barrel, but it did not appear to be blowback. The blood on Sirius's hand appeared to be drops from above rather than from a blowback. I also noticed that some blood had been smudged as if from contact by someone else.
Detective Tyler told us that Mr. Osiski's hands were swabbed for blood and gunpowder residue. What did the lab find?
The deceased's blood was on Thomas Osiski's hand, and there were gunpowder grains on his hand as well.
Were there gunpowder grains on the deceased's hand?
Yes, on his right wrist. We did not find any on the top of his hand, which you would expect if he fired the gun himself.
Did you form an opinion within a reasonable degree of certainty as to whether this was a self-inflicted wound?
Yes,
And what is that opinion?
that it was not self-inflicted.
And what do you base that on?
First, the location of the injury wound above and behind the right ear. Every single suicide I've investigated or read about, the fatal wound was delivered directly to the temple, the forehead, or upward in the mouth. The further you go back on the head, the less control you have over the gun, especially considering the recoil factor. Plus, the preserve of only a few gunpowder grains on the deceased's hair around the wound site tells me that the fatal shot was fired several inches away. Again, if you're trying to kill yourself, the further away the muzzle is from the target, the least your chances of success, or should I say, the least your chances of accomplishing your objective.
Can you please demonstrate what that would have looked like?
Yes. So, if you are trying to commit a suicide, you're going to go directly to the temple, upward in the mouth, or on the forehead. In this case, the gun was fired behind the right ear, directly back here, and lodged behind the left eye.
Thank you. Considering recoil and the angle of the wrist, wouldn't that cause wrist damage to the deceased?
Definitely. From the gun type to the angle the shot was fired, he would have had damage to the carpal bones as well as the forearm and elbow, maybe even a stress factor.
And did he have any of those injuries?
No, he did not.
So from your expert opinion, do you believe that this was murder?
Yes, based on everything with the case, it is beyond reasonable doubt a murder.
Thank you, Dr. Dre. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Lee, are you doing it? Okay, Ms. Dakota, go ahead.
Looking at the levels of alcohol and nitrazepam in Martin's system, could these levels be fatal?
Yes,
And did you take gunpowder samples during the autopsy?
yes,
When blood flows from an entry site, it can transfer grains of gunpowder away from the wound. Is this correct?
correct.
Blood flow can transfer grains from behind Martin's ear all the way down to his wrist. Is this correct?
Yes,
Therefore, is it possible for gunpowder grains to be transferred to someone else's hand by checking for a pulse?
that is correct.
Mr. Osiski walks in to see his friend after having committed suicide. Is it reasonable for him to check for a pulse?
Yes,
Would this explain why there was blood and gunpowder residue on our client's hand?
it could be.
Can you completely rule out suicide in this case?
No,
After working with thousands of cases and not being able to rule out suicide, you must have some uncertainty about the conditions of this case, correct?
a little.
Is there a possibility that Martin Suarez committed suicide?
Slight chance.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Can you redirect, Ms. Morgan?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wright. You may be excused. Does the state have another witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. I call Pat Nugent Sirius to the stand.
Mr. Sirius, please take the witness stand and be sworn by the bailiff.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Okay.
Please be seated. Mr. Rolfe, are you doing the examination on this one?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Could you please state your name for the court?
Pat Nugent Cyrus.
What is your relation to this case?
I'm Martin's son.
And where do you currently live?
I have lived at 77 Rockford, Rockway Lane in Rockford since January.
And who is it that you live with?
Just me and Marty.
Can you explain who Marty is?
He's my father. We were really getting to know each other, but that's all we know. He was also a member of Cirrhosis.
How did you come to find out that Martin was your father?
He and my mom got together after the show in summer of 1985, and the result was me. He didn't even know that I existed until 2004 when I went to one of his concerts and ran into him. I told him that I was his kid, and he gave me his number. He never kept in touch until I got into, or we never kept in touch until I got into trouble with the cops, and I called him to bail me out. After that, he took a paternity test, and it showed that he was my dad.
Did you and your father have a good relationship?
In particular, it's So Shizzo, their signature song. Martin told me many times that all Thomas ever contributed to the song was a title, but Martin gave him credit as a co-writer, and Thomas always said that it was his song, and that Martin ripped him off.
Let's talk about what happened the night of your father's death. How did you find out about it?
Well, at about 9:30, I was in the backyard cooling off in the pool when Thomas Osiski came running from the kitchen to the back patio, all nervous. I asked him, what are you doing here? Because he really had no reason to be there, because my father told him a week prior that the tour was off and Thomas went storming off all angry.
Do you know why Thomas was mad about the tour being called off?
Yes, he was in serious financial trouble and needed the money from the tour to pay off his house. Credit cards, child support for 2 different women, and $2,000 worth of fines.
Did Thomas ever say anything to your father after he canceled the tour?
I remember them talking about it and Martin telling Thomas, "You're a parasite. All the good stuff we ever did, I wrote. If you want to go on tour, do it yourself."
Did Thomas ever treat Martin, or threat Martin, while you were around him?
Yes, I remember Thomas telling my dad that he is a dead man walking.
When did Thomas say this to Martin?
When Marty got mad at Thomas for bugging him about canceling the tour.
Can you please elaborate on what happened?
Okay. Thomas was at the house and kept bugging Martin about the tour and why he should reconsider his decision, and Marty got fed up with it. Martin grabbed his gun out of his robe and started waving it around. Then Thomas wrestled him into the ground and took the gun from him. Told him that "you're a dead man walking," and left the house with the gun.
Do you know why Marty had the gun in his robe pocket?
He always had it on him. It was a security.
Is it normal for him to have his gun on him?
Yes, he has always had a gun with him, ever since the 80s when a crazy fan got into his hotel room and tried to stab him because the band didn't play the song that the guy wanted to hear.
We're going to change the subject quick and talk about the time before the incident happened. When you got home after going out with Alex, did you notice anything about Marty at the house?
Nothing unusual, just that the lights were on in that music room, so that meant Marty was in there.
Did you go talk to him at all?
No, I walked by the music room and went to my room to get some sleep.
Is it okay if we ask you some questions about your father's insurance plan now?
Yes,
Okay, so you were the beneficiary for the life insurance, right?
yes I was.
Are you aware of the rules for the death benefit on the policy?
Yes, I know the limitations for it.
So you are aware that there is a suicide limitation and a homicide limitation.
Yes.
Could you tell us about each of them, please?
Yeah, the suicide limitation stated that if the insured commits suicide within the policy date, the only amount payable will be a return of the premium paid for the policy. And the homicide limitation stated that if the insured's death is from an act of homicide committed by the beneficiary, no benefit will be paid under the policy.
Do you think that your father would have wanted to leave you with little or no money to gain from his insurance policy?
No, he wouldn't do something like that to me after we just rekindled the relationship.
Thank you, Pat. That is all the questions I have.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Reyes, did your father leave his house and assets to the Save the Music Foundation?
Yes.
And your father talked to you about the will, is this correct?
Yeah.
Were you upset when you found out that he had left you nothing in the will?
At first, I thought to myself, that it was kind of bad that he left it for not the will for me, but I just let it go.
And have you ever been charged with anything before?
Yes.
What was that charge?
Drug possessions?
Do you use drugs often?
Not anymore.
information. Mr. Shrez, did you grow up in a good home?
No.
And can you explain?
I had a very abusive father, stepdad.
And can you tell us about the death of your stepfather?
We went on a trip, and it was just me and him, and he got into an accident.
What was that accident?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Is there a response from the defense as to how it's relevant to this?
I'm trying to gain background information as to the character of our witness.
Okay, and for what? For what purpose, the character?
To talk about where he came from and where he is now, and how that affects the case.
Okay, just a couple things, we'll take a quick break here. Bad acts from previous about his drug conviction more than likely wouldn't be allowed in, because it goes to truthfulness. And, or if he had, if you want to say propensity to do something. As I understand your theory of the case, you're not saying that he did it yet. So, that probably wouldn't be allowed, that first question that you asked about his drugs. With this question right here, again, if you're, probably your theory of the case would be suicide, we would probably deny that as well. We would probably sustain the injection. It's all sustainable at this point.
Moving on, were your living conditions better when you were living with Marty?
Yes.
And would you miss living a luxurious life if Marty had passed away?
Yes.
And you were the beneficiary of his life insurance policy, correct?
Yes.
And if Marty committed suicide, you would not receive anything from your life insurance policy, correct?
Correct.
And you got nothing else from the will?
No.
So you would be left with practically nothing if he had committed suicide.
Yeah.
However, if it was a homicide, you would receive the $1 million, correct?
Yes.
And were you and Marty the only two at the house before Thomas got there?
Yes.
And did you hear a gunshot around 9:30?
No.
What were you doing before you were in the pool?
I was just cooling off.
A gunshot is very loud. Whether you were in the pool or the next room, you should be able to hear that, correct?
Yes.
And without a shell casing being found at the crime scene, that would make it look like a homicide, is this correct?
Yes.
Would you have reasonable motive to take the shell casing?
No.
So you're okay with returning to the trailer park life and being left with nothing from your own flesh and blood?
Yeah.
By not calling 911 right away, you would have enough time to find your father after he had committed suicide and take the shell casing to make it look like a homicide, is this correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
By not calling 911 right away, you would have enough time to find your father after he had committed suicide and take the shell casing to make it look like a homicide.
It would be enough time, but I didn't commit the homicide.
Explain why you were washing off in the pool, please.
I was just cooling off.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect by state?
No, Your Honor.
You may return to the audience. Thank you. Does the state have any further witnesses at this time?
No, Your Honor.
State rests. Defense, you have witnesses that you'd like to present at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. I have a deposition of our witness to be played for the jury.
Okay.
Let the record reflect today's date is November 18th, 2020. The current time is 12:42 p.m. Could you state your name for the court, please?
Cassidy Flaidlin.
Could you stand up and raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can sit down. Are you aware you're being disposed in the case of the state of North Dakota versus Thomas Osiski?
Yes.
Have you been disposed before?
No.
In your deposition, you will be asked questions and you're going to be answering them under oath. Do you understand this?
Yes.
There are a few differences between a deposition and a typical conversation that I want to make you aware of. In a normal conversation, folks sometimes interrupt or talk over each other, but here it's important that we wait for each other to finish asking or answering a question before the others begin talking. Do you understand this?
Yes.
Second, since this is an oral transcription, the court cannot hear nods or other gestures or uh-huh. Thus, every answer needs to be verbal. Do you understand this?
Yes.
Finally, unlike a typical conversation, your answers today are under oath, and this subjects you to potential criminal charges of perjury for willfully giving false, misleading, or incomplete testimony under oath. Do you understand this?
Yes.
Is there any reason, such as being under stress, a physical or mental condition, or being under the influence of any substances that would prevent or limit you today from giving truthful answers to the questions?
No.
There is nothing wrong with asking to repeat a question. However, if you answer a question, I'm going to assume that you understood it. Do you understand this?
Yes.
If you need clarification on a question, you need to look at that counsel for clarification and not to anyone else. Do you understand this?
Yes.
Defense, would you like to examine this witness?
Yes.
The witness is yours.
Can you state your name and spell it?
Cassidy Flaidlin, CassidyFlaidland.
Miss Flaidlin, I am Reagan Lee, an attorney. I represent Mr. Thomas Osiski. This is a deposition in which I will ask you questions and you must answer them truthfully. Although no judge is present, this is a formal legal proceeding just like testifying in court, and you are under the same legal obligation to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you do not understand any of my questions, feel free to say so and I will rephrase it. Before the deposition can be used in court, you will have the opportunity to read over it and correct any mistakes. Do you understand this?
Yes.
What is your relationship to Thomas Osiski?
I don't know him that well.
How often were you in contact with him?
I only saw him at Marty's.
What did Thomas's personality seem to be like?
Very self-centered, looked out for himself.
What do you know about the tour?
That Pat and Thomas were very excited about it.
How did Thomas act towards the idea of the tour?
It seemed like that he needed it because it seemed like he needed the money.
How did Thomas react when he found out the tour had been canceled?
He did not be happy. He was not happy about it. He needed the money for financial things, so he was not happy.
Could you tell from an outside view that Thomas was experiencing a financial crisis?
Not right away, but when they canceled the tour, you could tell.
Would Thomas have any reason to kill Marty?
No.
Were you at Marty's house at the time of the incident on Memorial Day?
No. As soon as I was going in, Thomas was leaving.
When did you get to Marty's house on Memorial Day?
Later that night.
Did you see Thomas walk out of the house with the gun?
No.
What is your relationship with Pat?
Been best friends since high school.
When did you first meet?
Junior high.
How often did he confide in you about his father?
He called me every now and then.
What do you know about Pat's previous family life?
That it was abusive and not good.
How did Pat cope with his family's troubles?
By listening and making music.
What do you know about how Leonard Skinner died?
That it was an accident and that he was drinking and he fell off the cliff.
How did Marty react to finding out he had a son?
He did not believe it at first.
Can you explain Marty's mood from the times you spent with him?
That he's a roller coaster. You don't know what Marty you're gonna get.
Did you see Marty drinking often?
He always had a bottle of Jack Daniels.
Did you see him taking drugs?
He always had his sleeping pills.
Explain the Saturday you spent with Pat the night before Marty died.
Me and Pat went out to a few bars, and after that, I went home, and I have no clue where he went.
Can you tell about the phone call you got from Pat?
That he was very upset.
How was he reacting to the news he just received?
Not well.
What time did you guys leave on Saturday night?
I left at 2, and I don't know where he went.
Did Pat go with you?
No,
Do you know where Pat went?
no,
Based on your experiences of being around Thomas, do you believe he is capable of killing Marty?
no.
Mr. P, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Can you please identify this item?
It is my transcript.
Can you please describe this item?
It is a transcript that I gave to the grand jury.
I offer this item into evidence as Defendant's Exhibit 1.
Let the record reflect the transcript as Defense Exhibits 1.
Can you read the highlighted section of your affidavit?
He's a self-centered egomatic, but I don't think that he has it in him to kill him. He's not the type. He's all show. I've been in the music business for over a decade now. Some guys have the edge and some guys don't. Duke can talk the talk, but if it came down to it, he would never be able to pull the trigger. If Marty is dead, he probably did it to himself.
You're talking about Thomas, correct?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Prosecution, would you like to cross-examine this witness?
Yes.
Can you speak up one more time? Would you like to cross-examine this witness?
Yes.
You may proceed.
When you were interviewed by Detective Fournier, you were unaware of what had happened to Marty, correct?
Yes.
You were very shocked when told that Marty had died, correct?
Yes.
Now focusing more on the interview, is it correct that you said, and I quote, Pat wouldn't do anything to hurt his meal ticket, aka Marty?
Yes.
And how long have you known Pat?
Since junior high.
Were you aware of what Pat's family was like growing up?
Yes.
Could you briefly describe his family life for the jury, please?
Very abusive, not good.
Did Pat spend a lot of time in his house growing up?
No.
What did Pat do in his free time since he wasn't ever home?
He would go somewhere and listen and make music.
Well, we're gonna switch the subject here, but you and Pat were in a band together, right?
Yes.
And Pat met his father, Marty, through this band, correct?
Yes.
After they got reunited, did you ever spend time at the house with both of them?
Can you please repeat the question?
After they got reunited, did you ever spend time at the house with both of them?
Yes.
I understand from the interview that you knew about Marty's sleeping problem, correct?
Yes.
Could you please explain what you knew about his sleeping problem?
That he could never sleep.
Do you remember Pat telling you that I don't think my dad's sleeping pills are working because he is always in the music studio with the lights on at night working on music?
Can you please repeat that?
Do you remember Pat telling you that I don't think my dad's sleeping pills are working because he is always in the music studio with the lights on at night working on music?
No.
Okay, now let's talk about Thomas. Is it correct that you told Detective Fournier that Thomas is a piece of work and that you're happy to keep your distance from him?
Yes.
Is it true that Thomas is very angry with Marty about canceling the tour?
Yes.
It said in an interview that Thomas was very self-centered and only wanted the money from the tour. Was that correct?
Yes.
Did Thomas ever ask Marty when he decided to cancel the tour?
Can you please repeat that?
Did Thomas Osiski ever ask Marty why he decided to cancel the tour?
I don't know.
Thank you. That is all the questions I have.
Would defense like to redirect?
No.
All right, let the record reflect. It is now 12:52 p.m. on November 18th, 2020.
Does the defense have their next witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can go ahead and call the next
Thomas
witness.
Osiski.
Please approach the bailiff and be sworn.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay.
Can you state your name for the jury?
Thomas Osiski.
Thomas, when did you first meet Martin Serez?
We first met in high school.
When did you join his band?
I joined when their old bass player got hepatitis and then I auditioned.
Have you been in the band ever since?
Yeah, we started playing locally after and then eventually across the country.
Can you briefly explain your friendship with Marty?
We had the best enemies of our lives and he was like a brother to me.
Can you describe Marty's usual day-to-day mood?
He's a very dark person and he's always preoccupied with death and dying.
Did you experience Marty having frequent mood swings?
Yes, he was very temperamental.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Can you please identify the defendant?
My charges.
Can you describe in detail?
It's a weapons charge I got in 94.
Your Honor, I offer this document into Exhibit 2, Defense Exhibit 2.
Any objection by the state?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit is received.
May I publish this to the jury?
You may.
Can you please read the highlighted section of your criminal history report?
Criminal possession of a controlled substance, 5-degree felony. Criminal possession of a weapon, 3rd-degree felony.
Is this your only charge involving a gun?
Yes.
Can you briefly explain this scenario?
We were in a car, we got pulled over, and I got searched, and they found a loaded pistol and drugs under the driver's seat, but they weren't mine, and I was sitting back passenger side.
How do you feel about guns?
They terrified me.
Do you have a history personally handling firearms?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Can you please identify this item?
My affidavit,
Can you please describe this item?
the testimony I gave.
Your Honor, may I? Your Honor, I offer this document into Defense Exhibit 3.
Any objection by the state?
No, Your Honor.
May I publish this to the
It
jury?
is received and you may publish.
Can you read the highlighted part of the affidavit pertaining to the incident on Memorial Day?
I went over to remind Marty that we only had a month before the tour started, but there was no talking to him because he was so wasted. Plus, he was waving that fool gun around, which scared the hell out of me. I tried to talk some sense into him, but it was pointless. He fell back on the couch and I managed to grab the gun out of his hand. I gave it to Pat, which inside was a big mistake. said, hide this thing, some of you won't find it when he wakes up.
Did you personally handle the gun?
Only when I took it away from him.
What happened to the gun after it was taken from Marty?
Oh, I gave it to Pat and I told him to hide it.
Do you think Marty could have committed suicide?
Well, that's very probable.
Now looking at Pat, what kind of person does Pat seem like to you?
He was a punk, he was very about the money, and he was very disrespectful to his money.
Now to the day of Marty's death. Why did you go to Marty's house on May 31st, 2009?
I was trying to convince him to do the tour again.
Were you drinking that night?
No,
What time did you go to Marty's house?
around 9:30 p.m.
What was the first thing you noticed as you approached the house?
The door was ajar.
When you walked in the house, what did you do?
Oh, I said hello, there's no answer.
When there was no answer, what were your next actions?
I walked to the studio because that's where I was going to be.
Where did you find Marty?
In the studio.
Explain how Marty looked when you found him.
He was slumped over the piano.
Did you think he was just passed out?
Yeah, I was trying to think of this.
What did you do as you approached him?
I shook his right shoulder and I said, wake up.
What was the song that was playing in the studio?
Hanging by that stuff.
What did Marty have with him at the piano?
A bottle of Jack Daniels and those scattered around.
What made you realize Marty was dead?
When I shook him, he was very stiff and I checked his pulse and there was none.
How did you get the blood on your hands?
From touching him on his shoulder.
Did you see the gun at the scene?
Yeah, it was laying on the floor under his digging around.
Where was the gun? Oh. What did you do after you realized he was dead?
I went out to the back to call 911
Where was Pat?
in the pool washing off.
Was Pat doing anything out of the ordinary?
Yeah, he was in the pool with the bar soap.
When you went back to the studio with Pat, what was his reaction to seeing his dead father for the first time?
He had no reaction at all.
Did this seem odd to you?
Yes, it's his father. Why would he have a reaction?
When did you call the police?
Right after.
Were you on good terms with Marty at the time of his death?
Yes, but we didn't have a good day on the day.
What were you feeling towards Marty about canceling the tour?
Kind of mad because I really needed money.
Had Marty ever considered canceling previous tours?
Yes.
How did you end up going on the tour?